Coldbox provides you with the relocate method, which you can use to relocate to other events. This functionality comes from the framework supertype component, which powers a lot of the core functionality within Coldbox. Like other MVC frameworks, using the framework provided method is preferable over using the CF location tag for moving between pages in your app. There are several reasons for this. First, CF location is not framework aware, meaning the relocate method not only moves you from one event to another, it also makes sure that the flash scope persists between the requests. We'll cover flash scopes in a different video. Relocate also makes sure that logging and post-processing interception is handled safely. These things could be done with the CF location tag, but you'd probably have to write a lot of the code manually to do it, rather than being able to take advantage of the pre-existing functionality within Coldbox. Also, and this is the big one, using the Coldbox methods means we'll have other benefits when it comes to integration testing. The framework methods can be mocked, whereas native CFML functions cannot. So when we're writing tests, you'll get a lot more value out of your tests by using the relocation method and other Coldbox functionality, even if there is similar functionality in the native CFML language that does kind of the same thing. Really just take advantage of Coldbox whenever you can, if for no other reason than to make it easier to test your applications, because that's a huge thing in modern web development, being able to test as much of your code as possible. We'll cover tests and using TestBox in a later video. The main takeaway here is use relocate instead of the CF location tag. Here's the latest version of our user details form. It does pretty standard stuff. Save some user data into a database table, and when we're done, we need to relocate to a different page in the application. Here is the save method in our event handler. As you can see, after it saves everything into the database, we use relocate to bounce the user back to the list page. Pretty simple function here, relocate event equals, and you pass it user.list, which is the user's event handler CFC, and we're calling the list method inside it, which is this code right up here. And as we know from the earlier videos, after the user list event handler runs, it will automatically move us to the user list view, just by using our relocate function, similar to how you would use the CF location function in a native CFML application without a framework. You can also use the query string argument if you need to add any extra information into the query string for that new event. You can see we're using that version of relocate here on line 59. I've got the same users.list event that we saw just a moment ago, and I've tacked on query string equals saved equals 1, which is just a placeholder for query string data you might have coming in from another value in your RC scope or some other chunk of code somewhere in your application. So here I'm going to go back to my browser, click save, and you can notice here in the URL, it added saved/1 to our URL after the users list event handler. And of course, the saved/1 format is because we're using search engine safe URLs, even though it started out here in our code as saved equals 1. When it was processed through the Coldbox engine, it came out as search engine safe URLs there for us automatically. I didn't have to do anything extra to make that work. Instead of the event argument, you can also use the URL to forward to a fully qualified URL, like the one we have here. So you can see instead of event equals something, I've got URL equals, and then after the save functionality has been completed, we're just going to bounce the user over to the Order Solutions website itself. I'll go here to my browser, save, and you can see we're now on ordersolutions.com. Or you can use the URI argument to move to a relative URL. It doesn't have to be a Coldbox event. It could be, say, a static contact HTML page that just lives on your website and doesn't get processed through Coldbox. So you can see here I have URI/user/list because we are in a Coldbox application. I'm just going to demo that, and you can see it bounces us back to users list. So in a Coldbox context, this sort of syntax doesn't really do anything different than the first type of syntax that we used. But let's say this is on a bigger website where maybe there are static things like a contact page. I could just put /contact here, and that would bounce me to that relative URL in my application, even though the /contact portion of my website is not part of a Coldbox app. You could do pages like this, where it's not a Coldbox app, or pages like this that are a Coldbox app. Either sort of relative URL will work as long as you use that URI option in the relocate function. There are several other arguments and features available within the relocate function. It really does provide more options than the default CF location tag does. And even if you never use relocate for more than bouncing from one event to another, it's still preferred instead of using CF location. If nothing else, you're future-proofing your code for features you might want to add later. Plus, your app will be more flexible when it comes to things like unit testing, interception, and other features that you just cannot take advantage of without being in a Coalbox framework application using Coalbox features. If you'd like more information on how the relocate function works, you can view additional details here on the ortusbooks.com website. You can also go to the API documentation, search for framework supertype, and that will give you information about not just the relocate method, but everything else in the framework supertype class, which is one of the core fundamental pieces that provides all the Coalbox functionality.